Where Winds Meet is one of those games I've had my eye on for a long time, but I never really fully got into. I did jump in briefly around launch back in November, but I just got distracted with other games that launched around the same time, and I just never really got that far along. So when Everstone reached out recently to ask if I'd be interested in checking out all the new content they've added since launch, including the brand new Kaifeng Imperial Palace expansion that just released, it was actually great timing, and I was really impressed to see everything they've added because they've definitely added a lot. And if you enjoyed Crimson Desert, then I actually think there's a very good chance you'll like Where Winds Meet, because its biggest strength is definitely the fact that they just give you a bunch of interesting mechanics and cool gear to play with, and a big beautiful sandbox to play in, and then you get to experiment and explore. Plus, at the Xbox showcase that just happened on June 7th, they announced the Hidden Mountain expansion, which is another new big content update dropping in July, and for me, that looks like some of the coolest content yet. I really like the look of these big ancient machines, and it looks like they're adding some new mechanics and a bunch of interesting puzzles, and the new region might be my favorite one yet with this mountain forest vibe going on. The game is now also available to play on Xbox, where it's free to play just like everywhere else, and you can just sign in with your account and pick up where you left off on another platform. So I want to show you everything you can find in the new Imperial Palace expansion, but I also want to give you a broader look at the game to help you decide if you want to dive in. The Imperial Palace itself and the surrounding city are definitely the highlight of the new expansion, and it's absolutely massive. I was already impressed as I started to explore it, but then Everstone also told me it's actually over 1 million square meters, and it's meant to be a recreation of the actual Northern Song Imperial Palace from the Song Dynasty around 1000 AD. So that added another layer of depth I wasn't expecting, which I thought was pretty cool. But there's just a ton of stuff to do here, both with the new main quests and a bunch of side content and activities, on top of exploring and interacting with over 3,000 NPCs in the area. The main story, which begins with the Throne and Tempest quest that you can start by eavesdropping on NPCs near the southern gate, is focused on rumors of a secret sealed treasury built deep under the palace. You'll find there's a thief trying to break into the treasury, and you end up getting entangled in this whole heist situation that actually has more layers to it and involves a lot more characters than I initially thought it would. I don't want to spoil too much of it, but you end up pursuing an assassin as part of this quest line, and at one point you go through this cool rooftop chase sequence that's a mix of cinematics, QTEs, and actual combat for a boss fight. And the whole secret treasury vault questline is quite a bit more involved than just dealing with this assassin. You start off basically being mistaken as the thief yourself and becoming a double agent, joining the Imperial Guard to gain access to more restricted areas of the palace, and trying to figure out who are actually the good guys and who the bad guys are. There's ghosts involved, or at least people think there are ghosts involved. A bunch more shady characters come into play, and even the Emperor himself becomes part of it. And as you work through this quest exploring the palace, you'll come across a bunch of side activities to do, which I've learned are definitely a big part of this game in general. You've got things you might expect, like I found a mounted archery competition that was a fun little challenge, but then you've also got others that are more lighthearted and funny. Like, I found this guy who wanted me to race his dogs at one point. Yeah, I'm definitely way faster than these dogs. I totally smoked them. But what I liked even better was cricket fighting, where you literally have to go catch yourself a cricket, and then you throw it into this little basket to battle against another guy's cricket, and you play a little mini game where you actually control your cricket in the fight. Another one like that is a slapping mini game you can find with a group of guards in the palace, and it's not just simple slaps back and forth. You can dodge and fake the opponent out to try to trick them before you slap them. And once you're slapped silly, you can go sit on the dragon throne, which is obviously not allowed, so you'll immediately get thrown into prison, where you either have to break out or bribe the parrot guard to let you out. Honestly, these sort of gimmicks and silly creature characters usually aren't my thing, but I actually found a lot of these little interactions and minigames funny, and some of them are pretty creative. Like, probably my favorite minigame was part of the Grand Duo ritual quest. At one point during this quest, you have to heal the ceremony organizer, and instead of just a simple button press to help her, you actually play this sort of card game where you need to basically battle with her affliction to put it at bay. I thought this was a pretty cool and creative approach to something most developers probably would have just made a simple button press or QTE or something, so that was cool. And the Nuo ritual itself was cool as well, because it's a recreation of an actual ancient Chinese ceremony. As I understand it, the Nuo ritual is intended to pacify troublesome spirits, cure diseases, and bring good fortune. and for this quest in the game, you get to take part as the lead of the ceremonial procession and go through some interesting sequences. I thought this really highlighted how, even though there's plenty of open world exploration and combat in Where Winds Meet, it's really about more than that, with lots of cool stuff to explore and experience, with some special activities like this intended to showcase interesting parts of Chinese culture. But there's also so much more to this update, and to find things, I really liked exploring around with the lightness skill, which lets you launch way up into the sky with some very stylish different animation options and then float down while you get a great view of the surrounding area. This freedom of mobility is definitely a highlight of the game for me, and I want to circle back to that in a minute when we talk about the game more broadly, but at one point while I was doing this, I found this well near the rear gardens in the palace, and it turned out to actually lead to a side boss, the Gilded Lament, that I had no idea was there. I don't want to spoil too much of the fight sequence with her, but I thought this was definitely the coolest boss fight I encountered in the game so far. There are actually 4 new bosses with this update though, and between her and the assassin we mentioned earlier, that's only 2 of them. So there's at least a couple more for you to discover totally for yourself. But one of the other cool things about this new update is the fact that you can change the season from summer to winter to gain access to different types of activities. You actually need to do that for certain quests, but in winter there's also a series of snowmen that you can go find and help construct. There's snowball fights, lantern lighting, and ice carving also, which is actually its own little mini game where you have to try to recreate the picture you're given. And yes, I did get an A on this beautiful recreation of a bamboo stalk. I mean, come on. Don't tell me that doesn't look like a bamboo stalk. But I actually found changing seasons was even more fun in other regions where you can choose between all 4, like here in the southeast Hexi region where you can really see the difference in the grassy landscape. And I found it really cool that you can transform into the wind here to travel around, and that the style of your wind form actually changes depending on the season. So in spring and summer, you're like flowers and butterflies, but in autumn, you turn into these red leaves, which was definitely my personal favorite. And in winter, you turn into icy snowflakes. Just another cool extra bit of attention to detail that exceeded my expectations and that I thought was pretty cool. If turning into the wind doesn't sound cool enough for you though, you can also turn into a fancy spectral koi fish in a different part of the Hexi region. And for that one, in the desert areas, there's also these shimmering pathways you can follow for a big speed boost while in koi form. This desert region also really showcases the variety of environments you can get in this game. The palace is definitely cool, but I personally love natural environments, so I was really drawn to this sprawling desert and also the lush grasslands we talked about before. In the time I've spent playing, honestly, my favorite thing to do is just head off in a random direction away from settlements and see what I can find, because the environments are beautiful and there's pretty much always something interesting to find, even if it's just a little bit of loot or a special resource or something. I think that's really where this game shines, just exploring and experimenting with what you can do and what you can find. In that way, it's similar to Crimson Desert. It's the sort of game that says, hey, here's a big cool sandbox and a bunch of toys, aka mechanics, for you to play with. Go have fun figuring out what you can do. So if you're into that kind of thing, you'll probably like Where Winds Meet. But since we're talking about exploration, now's a good time to circle back on all the mobility options you have. So you can of course run, but if you keep holding down the sprint button, your character will run super fast, and you can actually run up walls and buildings, do a wall run along walls, and even run up trees in this mode. You've also got a triple jump that gets you up quite high, and that's in addition to the lightness skill I mentioned earlier that just absolutely launches you. You've also got an air dash while in midair, and of course you've got a mount you can call anytime. And this mobility translates to combat as well. I really like how responsive and fast-paced it feels. You're rarely locked into any animations, and you can dodge, block, parry, and jump. And then on the offensive side, there's just a ton of different gear, mechanics, and systems to play with. I wouldn't say the combat is super challenging, and the game does have difficulty levels if you want to adjust that, but there's definitely a lot of build potential and variety in combat mechanics. I played around with a bunch of weapons from about 8 different weapon classes, and in combat, you can carry 2 melee weapons and a ranged weapon, and you can quickly swap between all of them at any time. Then you've also got abilities to equip and skills or talents to learn. And those 2 things go a couple of layers deep. So abilities include martial arts, which you can actively use in combat, your inner way abilities, and mystic skills. You can use offensive mystic skills in combat, but then there's also general and movement mystic skills, which are things like the triple jump and air dash. So yeah, there's lots of things to unlock and plenty of combinations you can play with to create powerful and fun builds. And outside of combat, there's just a ton more to explore that I haven't even touched on yet. Yes, there is fishing, and the minigame you play to catch fish fish is actually one of the better ones I've experienced. There's also lots of little puzzles and interactions around the different regions that reward you with valuable resources. Like, for example, these mystical birds you need to freeze in place in the air. Or at one point, I found this bear that needed its color given back, and when I helped it out, it dug up some loot for me out of the river. You'll also find things like these puzzle locks you need to solve to open chests, which again, similar to fishing, I thought was one of the better implementations I've seen for a mechanic like this. Not very hard, but interesting and fun to quickly do. So yeah, overall, I've been pleasantly surprised by Where Winds Meet. There's a lot on offer here, especially with the new Imperial Palace expansion that just dropped. Like I said, I think the biggest strengths are exploration and experimentation with creating fun and powerful builds to take on all the stylish bosses. And the game is free to play, so really no risk in giving it a try. I will say you should plan to give it at least a handful of hours because there's quite a few mechanics and systems to learn, and the beginning can feel kind of slow. But again, it's free to play, so you can take your time and not worry about a 2-hour return on Steam or anything like that. You can play Where Winds Meet on PC, PlayStation, and now on Xbox, and it's actually on iOS and Android as well. Let me know what you think in the comments if you dive in. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.